Hi, what's up everyone? This is Bob with 1L and Back, and in this video I'm going to be going over the 5 most common pitfalls that students, that bar takers fall into, that they find themselves in when they're going through taking the bar. Now, in this video I use some terminology, some acronyms that I outline and introduce in some of my other videos. So if this is where you started, I would encourage you, hey, stick around, watch this video if you want. But really the best place to start with my entire philosophy to bar prep and how I approach everything, go back and watch that 10 things that you must know before taking or retaking the bar. It's absolutely foundational. Anyway, with that said, we can jump into a little bit more of how it affects us as students, right? In the other videos, I've kind of talked about this from the bar examiner's perspective, right? How do the bar examiners like to write these questions? How do the bar examiners think about this in terms of, again, it's not about tricking students. And any good bar prep instructor is going to tell you there's no tricks, right? But there are techniques that the bar examiners use. And they use these techniques to essentially separate right answers from wrong answers, people who are going to pass versus people who are not going to pass. What I want to do in this video is now talk about a little bit more from the test taker side, from the examinee side, from the student side, if you will. Because just like we had those 5 bar examiner techniques, here we're going to talk about 5 pitfalls that students find themselves in. So let's just jump into it. And you're going to see there's a lot of overlap here. There's a lot of overlap between what I talked about in the earlier videos and here, which I think makes perfect sense because naturally the bar examiners, they're doing what they're doing because it's effective. So if they have a particular technique that's effective, it's probably because it's going to result for at least 50% of students in going down one of these particular pitfalls. And so that's what we're going to talk about. So the first one, the simplest one to correct, is the misreading, right? We either read too fast or we just straight up misread something. And believe me, it is not a reflection of how smart you are. It's not a reflection of how talented you are as an attorney. It's a lot to read in a short period of time when you're talking about the actual bar exam, right? That's a lot of words to read in those 6-hour blocks, combined with all the stress and pressure that's going on, right? And then also you take that on top of everything you have to read going into the bar exam, coming off the fact that you just did around, give or take a little bit of time, but you basically just did 3 years in law school where you didn't do a ton else besides read. I mean, that was the primary thing we did in law school, right, was read. The idea is that for the bar exam, when we get to the bar exam, it's like, gosh, we're so close. We just want this thing to be done. You get these long, painfully long fact patterns, right, about things that nobody in their right mind wants to read about. Nobody wants to sit and read a 3-paragraph hypo about, a car accident and whether or not this other party can be joined because they're trying to do some Rule 15 relation back, right? I mean, who wants to deal with that? Or even worse, they start talking about something like non-mutual issue preclusion. And you're like, what? We never even talked about that in law school. The simplest way, though, to handle this that I've found, and it seems basic, but I think it's actually really helpful, and there's going to be 2 things. The first, what I highly, highly, highly encourage you to do is with your pencil on the MBE day, with your pen on the MEE day, go through, and I'm not kidding, literally touch your pencil or pen to every single word in that question. It's not going to take you an appreciably longer time than it would if you didn't do that. You are going to find that your ability to comprehend goes up dramatically when you're not trying to just read, look at, and process it. The point is, if we take the time and we are aware, truly aware of every single word that's in that question, in that, whether it's the facts, the call, the question, or the answer choices, we know we're not going to miss anything. And it's not going to take longer to do that. Why? Because what do I always say? Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Take a minute. Look, next time you're looking at a bar question, don't look at the answers. Don't look at the call, the question. Just look at the facts. and spend 1 minute, spend 60 seconds just looking at that, thinking about that, reading every word, not doing anything else. My bet, my wager is that you will finish reading in 40 seconds or so, and then you'll be sitting there for 20 seconds like, okay, now I'm ready to go on to the next thing. That's okay. Now, obviously, in the bar exam, we don't need to do it so regimented as that, but the idea is you have more time than you think. What does that mean? You have time to read and understand these fact patterns. Do not fall into the trap of thinking, oh, I got to get to the next thing. I'm taking too long reading. Because for every time that your brain is kind of running that program, if you will, the I'm taking too long and trying to speed up in other areas, that's less mental energy that you can spend actually on reading what's in front of you. And that's all that the bar examiners can fairly ask any of us to do, right? Is just to read what's on the page. So we know they're trying to give a fair exam. Read what's on the page. What's a way that they can stratify? What's a way that they can break people into correct and incorrect? Well, one simple way that's objectively fair is to change words around, to add a not, to add a then, to add a clause at the end of the sentence that, I used in another video. Conditions with contracts is a great example. They can do a whole thing about a condition that's really intricate, and then they can say, well, one of the parties just waived it. Or even better, it's a condition that's only for one of the parties' benefit, and so that part, it doesn't even have to be enforced. The point is, the only way we know that stuff, the only way we can even recognize that, the only way we can even really be sure that we're answering the question that the bar examiners are asking us is if we read. So the close reading, that is the most important. I guarantee you haven't gotten this far in school without at least having spent some time diagramming sentences. Now, of course, don't yell at me. You're not going to diagram sentences on the bar exam. I get it. But we do remember from those days in school, we know what a noun is. We know what a verb is. We know what an adjective is. We know what a conjunction is, right? We don't even need to go past that. I mean, articles, definite, indefinite, whatever. The point is, we know what each of those things are. We know what a sentence is. A sentence is that string of words. There's a punctuation, there's a period or an exclamation point that ends it. And we know that each of those words, for it to be a sentence, we know that each of those words is going to have a particular function. Now, the way the bar examiners like to do this, the bar examiners can take a normal, well-written, clear, concise statement that's maybe 3 sentences. And they can chop it up, move it around, write stuff, add double negatives. And they can take 3 sentences, make it 8 sentences, and make it incredibly dense, incredibly difficult to read. The exact things that your 7th grade English teacher taught you not to do. They do it purposely on the bar exam for the reasons we've been talking about. It makes it harder to read. It makes it harder to comprehend, which is why it's so important to do the first thing that I talked about, which is making sure that we read every single word that's in the fact pattern, making sure we physically touch our pen or our pencil to every single word. Then, as we're going through doing that, we might see that there's a sentence or two that makes absolutely no sense. The good news is we don't have to panic. We never have to panic on the bar exam because everything we need is right there in front of us. Everything we need is right there. So all we have to do is say, okay, what is this sentence actually saying? And if we can break down, if we really have no clue, we just identify, okay, well, who's the subject of this sentence? Okay, yeah, well, there's the plaintiff. The man, the friend, the farmer, the banker, right? Okay, and what's the verb? What are they doing? Oh, okay, well, and then from there we can start to see what happens in the particular sentence. Again, we don't need to sit there and stress about we're going to diagram every sentence or we're going to identify. By the time you get to the exam, a lot of this stuff, if we've practiced, this is going to be second nature. But again, this is not the way that we read in law school. This is not the way that we read in all the stuff undergrad and up to get to law school. So it does require us to think a little bit differently. Again, why are we doing this? Because another way the bar examiners can break people into, correct versus incorrect is by taking something that's difficult, by taking something that normally would be easy to read and making it a little more difficult and seeing if do you have the patience, right? It's not about your intelligence, it's not about your intellectual ability. It's do you have the patience? Do you have the confidence that if you sit there, you're not going to run out of time? If you sit there for the minute, read the facts, understand what's going on, okay, now I can move to the next part. And if there's a sentence that makes absolutely no sense, do I even need to worry about that sentence? Or is it just, is the whole sentence just a string of adjectives or something that's totally irrelevant to what's really going on in the fact pattern? It's where you get to use a little bit of your critical thinking, not that we want to do much critical thinking on the bar exam, but if we take this approach, the point I'm making is that if we take this approach and go slowly and methodically through what we're doing, we're going to see these questions that seem like they're written in this terribly dense, impossible to understand format. We can start to see what they're doing to us. So that is the first most common pitfall that students have. They misread. Simple enough fix. But one that certainly should not be overlooked. I mean, this is money right here if you can correct this. Okay, so the second area that I see students make mistakes in, and I know, by the way, guys, as I go through and I talk about this and I say, I see students do this, I see students do that, first and foremost, it all comes from my experience too. So all of the mistakes that I caution against are all mistakes, I promise you, that I have made. And the only way I know how to not make them is because I've made them. And so what I want to say here first, just this is kind of an aside, but hey, we could all use a little break. The point is, don't get discouraged, right? Just because you miss a question, or you missed a series of questions, or you had a really bad day and you scored 30% on the question, right? What matters is that we learn from the mistakes, and that's it's cliche. You've heard it a bunch, but so what does that actually mean, Bob? Well, what it means is that if you get a couple of questions in a row wrong, stop, take a break. Go get a drink of water. Go, hop on Facebook or Instagram for a minute and just reset. Go outside, take a walk, whatever you got to do. But again, with all of this stuff, we have more time than we think. So the second big issue that I see for people, and again, I have done this myself, is the analyzing, right? And this gets tied in. Analyzing and arguing are kind of our next two. They go together, so I'm going to talk about them kind of together. What we talk about with analyzing, with arguing on bar questions is, and this is where we say we don't want to do it, this is dealing with the conclusions first and foremost, right? So this is looking at a fact pattern. I've used the example a bunch about summary judgment, and us as lawyers, using our lawyer brain, thinking as lawyers, on all the cases that we read, on all the lectures that we've sat through, all the discussions we've had with teachers and with peers, and the law review article you wrote, and all this other stuff that goes into our head, and that we're trying to take these facts and we're almost trying to run them through that filter of all that other stuff that we learned. And then we're looking at the answers and we're saying, what is the answer that most closely relates to the outcome that I got after I ran it through the filter of all my law school experiences? Please do not do that. Do not do that. That is one of the worst things you can do on the bar exam. I am guilty of it, particularly in the area where you practice. The point is, you get to the bar exam and you start looking at the evidence questions or the crim questions and applying all of the stuff that we learned. And it's not that stuff's wrong per se, right? But it's wrong in this context. It's wrong in the context of the bar, because getting back to what I say in that video about 10 things you have to know before you even start to approach this, they're not just testing you. So that library that you have, that mental library of all the stuff you learned, nobody else has that. And so it's not fair for the bar examiners to ask a question that you could get right because you have this whole, thing that you learned in law school. No. They're only testing you on these definitions. And these definitions are just made up of elements. And it's just this list that they have, right? And so if we start to get hung up on the conclusion of a particular question, yes, this person's going to be guilty. No, this person's not going to be guilty. Liable, not liable. Yes, there's a contract. No, there's not a contract. Yeah, that's a valid easement. No, that you get the point, right? You apply this to any area of law, and you can see how there's a real life thinking, right? There's a real life, okay, this is what the correct answer should be. This is the correct answer if I'm applying the full weight of my legal analysis, versus this is the correct answer for MBE. And that latter deal, that this is the correct answer for MBE, that's what you want. So remember, analyzing, arguing, getting hung up on what the conclusion is, that's a bad road. And any decent bar instructor, one of the first things they're going to work with you on is kind of decoupling yourself from what the actual conclusion is. Because again, when you first start doing bar questions coming out of law school, you want to feel like I learned something in law school, right? You want to feel like it's like you did good, like you know how to practice law now. And then it's discouraging when you're like, well, I thought I knew how to practice law, but I'm only getting 50% of the bar questions right. Well, you're only getting 50% of the bar questions right, not because you don't understand the law, although for some of us, that's probably part of it. You're getting 50% of the questions right, more so because you are not recognizing what they're trying to do to you. You're not taking the time to carefully read the question. You're not taking the time to recognize where the bet is, right? What that bar examiner technique is that they're doing. And you're not taking the time to then go through the answer choices and say, only one of these answer choices is going to align with what the facts are talking about and what the bar examiners are trying to do in that question. Only one of these answers is going to be so specific to what they're trying to do that that's how we know which answer is objectively correct. We don't try to reason and think through it in a legal sense, all the cases that we read, right? We don't do that. We just think about it in terms of the definitions that we've memorized. So now, instead of thinking about that whole library, I called it a filter earlier, which I think is a decent example. We're not going to run our thinking through that filter. We're only going to run it through our list of definitions, our elements, our black letter law list of definitions. And that is the tool that we use. If we run everything through that and we keep our answers confined to that, we're going to be in much better shape. So we're 3 out of the 5, just to recap where we're at. We've talked about the misreading. We've talked about analyzing and arguing kind of together. But again, whether you overanalyze, whether you argue in the sense, well, I don't think that's the right conclusion, either way, you're getting the wrong answer. So we want to stay away from that. The fourth one, and I have a whole nother video about this, this is our Pavlovian trigger, right? And you'll notice I spell it a little bit differently than they do in the social sciences, right? But it's the exact same thing, right? And of course, I'm just being silly. The idea is that this is the response to the stimuli. This is the jumping at buzzwords. We're so grateful that we see something that we recognize, because maybe the last 4 questions we did, it's like, those weren't too good. Finally, we see one, oh, okay, good. This looks like it's a setup for felony murder, boom, thank God, at least there's one that I know. Well, if that's the attitude and the approach that we're taking, then we probably just got the 5th one in a row wrong, right? The idea is we must, we shall always be reading carefully, not panicking. And we never want, while buzzwords are our friend, we have to be conscious of the buzzwords. Buzzwords are what we're looking for. We don't just jump at a buzzword, right? In fact, in the other video, I kind of showed a little picture of my dog. This is a good example. So my dog's a little Jack Russell. He's insane. Run, jump at everything. If the blue ball, he loves these little blue bouncy balls. If the blue ball goes into the road, he's all on that. It doesn't matter if the car is coming down the road. He's locked in on that. The blue ball for him is that buzzword. We can't be like that. We cannot be single-minded, just focused on the buzzword. We have to be aware of it, but we have to also be aware of our surroundings. So that's the 4th one, right? We want to be aware of that Pavlovian trigger. And the fifth one, guys, this ties in with everything I've said so far. A very common mistake, a very common pitfall for students is to panic, is to just say, gosh, I don't know this question. And what do you do when you don't know the question? You pick an answer that you know is wrong. And this is how I had it explained to me, and I think this is absolute gold, right? If you pick an answer and I say to you, why'd you pick that answer? And you say, I don't know. That answer is wrong. I promise you that answer is wrong. Now, of course, maybe you got lucky and you picked the right answer. But here's the point. Never, please never pick an answer that you don't have a reason for why you're picking it. Right? Don't pick an answer just because, the question is hard, I'm just going to guess. Because there's no upside to doing that, right? What we need to do instead is we need to work through this system that I try to outline in all my videos. Obviously, we get in depth in the actual Beat the Bar course, but even if you are doing other bar prep and you're just kind of watching some of these free videos for more approach, what I'm trying to say works the same. It's the same point, which is this. If you are prepared, if you know your definitions cold, if you know the elements inside and out, you're going to be fine, right? Because the rest of the exam is about reading comprehension. It's about not panicking. It's about not getting so wrapped up, so psyched up in the moment of what you're doing. And gosh, if I don't pass this time, I got to wait another 6 months before I can take it again. And I got student loans, and we've all been there. And I can say, as somebody who took this, failed it the first time, and had to wait and take it again, it's okay. No matter what happens on this, it's going to be okay. But your best shot for a pass on the first try, or if you failed it before and you want to pass this time, the absolute best thing you can do is not panic. Remember, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Now, of course, you're saying to yourself right now, Bob, that's all great, but don't we actually have to learn some law too? Yes, of course we do. We're going to be getting into that the next set of videos that I'm going to be talking about here, both on the YouTube channel and just kind of what's out there for free. We're going to do some really high-level stuff, talking about some basic areas of law that you need to know before we go into the MBE. Obviously, then we can get into the specifics. But really, more than anything else, if you can keep these 5 pitfalls in mind, you're going to be in much better shape than you would be otherwise. So remember to watch out for the misreading, for the analyzing and arguing, for that Pavlovian trigger, and for that instinct that we have to panic and pick the weird Latin answer. We don't want to do that. Anyway, that's all for this video, guys. Thank you for tuning in. I love all of you very much, and I wish you nothing but success. Holler at me with questions. We are going to get through this together. We're going to get you where you want to be. Thanks a lot.